For the third year and counting, Richard Skipper has been celebrating the artists you love. Richard Skipper is all about celebrating life, art, and his guest's body of work. Please join us while he showcases these diverse and talented individuals. Here's Richard Skipper.
Happy Saturday, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. Who or what are you celebrating today? Well, I'm celebrating a few changes that I'm implementing here. Last night, during my celebration of Angela Lansbury, someone hacked into Facebook. And I found out that there was a way for them to go in and put them in actually as part of my team. So I've made a change today. In order to make a comment on this show, you need to be a subscriber of Richard Skipper Celebrates. And once we get a few more people here, I will tell you about our giveaway today. But who and what are you celebrating? I am celebrating Marion Davies today. I want to take you back to I'm a lot older than my guest today. And in 1974, the film That's Entertainment came out. And as a result of this film coming out, there was a nostalgia craze that went over the country. Everybody was looking back at old Hollywood. Very interesting fact that I will share with everyone. When That's Entertainment came out, it was only 20 years after Gigi. Can you imagine? I mean, going back 20 years ago and celebrating the artists that we have, not to disparage anyone, but there was a magic and there was a gleam and there was a special quality that all of those old stars had, older stars had. But in 1974, a book came out called The MGM Stock Company. And I have been looking desperately for this book for years. I hope that I will find it. In that book, there was one chapter about each of the MGM stars. And of course, one of those stars was Marion Davies. There's been a lot that's been written about her, a lot that's been said about her. And of course, we have the film Citizen Kane, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But not until now, with Lara Gabrielle, has she really delved into the life, the career, and as I like to call it, the body of worth of this amazing woman. I've learned so much about her that I had no idea about. And Laura, I want to begin by celebrating you today and congratulations on this incredible book.
Thank you so much, Richard. And the MGM Stock Company book?
Yes.
I know where you can get one. We'll talk.
Oh, we'll talk later. I mean, did you go back to that book as part of your research?
Well, actually, that book wasn't part of my research, but I came across it later, and the article, the piece about Marion, is surprisingly accurate. You know, that some of those books have things that are recycled from previous publicity things, and they tend to not be terribly accurate. But this one really was. I was very pleasantly surprised.
I want to, I'm going to drop a name. Carol Channing was a friend of mine, and I've dropped her name many times on this show. But when she wrote her memoirs of sorts, as she called it, she said writing a book is a solitary profession. But I'm not going to go there with you because you got the collaboration of so many people, and it truly is a collaborative effort. I want to go back in your history, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Where did this love of this time frame begin, and why Marion Davies?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. When I was a very small child, my grandmother showed me classic films. She had been a nurse actually at what was then Cedars of Lebanon and is now Cedars-Sinai Hospital. She took care of all these movie stars. When she was a kid, she had wanted to be a film critic. And anyway, she passed that on to me. And I loved classic films ever since I was, that age, like 4 or 5. Fast forward a bit, at my 13th birthday, I got a box of classic film memoirs, biographies. And one of them was a book called The Times We Had, which has been marketed as Marion Davies' memoir for many years. It's not exactly Marion Davies' memoir, but we can get into that. And I read it and I thought, this woman has lived an incredibly fascinating life. And not a lot has been written about her. Even at that young age, I knew that there was some sort of wrong that had been done with this woman, that there just was not that much out about her. I started a classic film blog when I was, well, back in 2011, I started this blog. And I realized how much I loved the research and the writing process. Was putting out all these blog posts with tons of research involved. And people started asking me, have you ever thought about doing something bigger? And I said, well, yes. And who could I write about who hasn't had a lot written about them? First name that came to mind was Marion Davies.
Wow.
And she stuck with me. I could not shake the idea of doing Marion Davies as a I didn't know what it would become, but as a larger project. So I took it as a sign that I could not get rid of this idea in my mind. I went down to LA, found her papers, and things started coming together pretty remarkably quickly. And that was 9 years ago. It's taken me 9 years to write this.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. And it, as I said, I didn't know what it would become, but it became clear to me probably about 2 months or so in that this was going to be a full-length biography and not a coffee table book, not anything. And so when I realized that, then I knew that I was in it for the long haul. I knew that I was in it for about this long, because that's how long it takes. It takes a lot of years to write somebody's full life.
Yeah. So I want to say, social media has, and you can find a lot of negative stuff out there, but there's some positive. And one of the biggest positives, I'm going to mention you, is finding you on Twitter, because you tweeted about the book and I immediately wrote to you and said, I want to do this. And you said, let's do it. So thank you for being here. What do you think is what do you know is the biggest misperception that people have about Marion Davies?
There are a lot of misconceptions. And I think that the biggest, we could talk about this big umbrella misconception, that she is Susan Alexander in Citizen Kane. You know, if you've seen the movie Citizen Kane, there's this character, Susan Alexander, who is an untalented opera singer who's had her career bankrolled by this character Kane. And then when she uses him up, she leaves him, right? Because Kane in Citizen Kane is considered to be William Randolph Hearst, people think automatically that Susan Alexander is considered to be Marion Davies. But the reality is a lot more complicated than that. The character of Kane is a composite. This character of Susan Alexander is a composite. And there's a character who is much more like Susan Alexander Kane in history than Marion Davies is. But Marion Davies is much more famous than this other person. So people think that she was untalented. People think that she used Hearst for his money. People think all of these things about her that are wrong because of this movie. And Orson Welles, to his credit, later on felt horrible about this, and that people thought that this was Marion Davies, and he apologized many times. Actually, he wrote the foreword for The Times We Had, which, as we mentioned before, was marketed as Marion Davies' memoir, essentially saying that this is not correct. But it lives on. It lives on because Citizen Kane lives on. So that's really the biggest misconception about Marion Davies. In reality, Marion Davies was an incredibly gifted, talented comedian, mimic. She impersonated the stars of the day with this remarkable accuracy. If you've ever watched something like Blondie of the Follies or The Patsy, you can see it. And she and Hearst were genuinely in love. And they were soulmates. And she spent 3 days by his bedside before he died, sleepless, waiting for the moment with a lot of fear. Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you, I found in my research, in addition to reading the book, I found this quote, and perhaps you can correct us if this is an actual quote from her or not.
Mhm.
Um, and the quote is, I had a really good time at MGM. Do you know the quote that I'm going with?
Yeah.
And we had no quarrels much, except once in a while, I'd go up to the front office and say, I thought I could be doing something big, like washing elephants. All my life, I wanted to have talent. Finally, I had to admit there was nothing there. Marion Davies. Is that
Okay.
an accurate quote?
I haven't heard her say that. I haven't heard her say that, but I wouldn't be. It sounds like Marion. It sounds like something that Marion would say. She didn't think a lot of herself. She didn't think a lot of her own talent, even though her talent was there in just so much.
Hmm.
But she was very modest and very not not terribly appreciative of what she had, um, in terms of talent. She thought that she was doing a job. That's the way that she approached her career. That she was doing a job, and that there was nothing really there to keep her a star. She didn't particularly want to be a star. She wasn't like Joan Crawford, for example,
Hmm.
who maintained her star at all costs. Uh,
Well, let's
Mary,
compare the two for a moment, if you don't mind.
sure,
Joan Crawford
yeah,
lived, ate, and breathed her career.
yes,
I mean, she knew what the publicity machine was at MGM, and she was at the beginning of her career and beyond, even at Warner Brothers. She knew what she needed to do to keep herself in the spotlight. Marion Davies, on the other hand, did not really like bringing a lot of attention to herself personally. She didn't do a lot of interviews. So that must have been painstaking work on your behalf to try to piece all the pieces together when she didn't go out and do a lot of these types of interviews. Is that a correct assessment of the two?
yes. Marion didn't give very many interviews, and the reason for that is, a couple of reasons for that. One, she had a very bad stutter, that she uh, knew would come out and that it would slow things down. So the interviews that she did give are in print, and not
On camera.
face to face, right? And she would only give those print interviews to the people that she knew really well. Like she gave an interview to Hedda Hopper, that is probably the most extensive interview that she ever gave, and it's not even terribly extensive. And she knew Hedda from way back. So, so yes, she didn't give interviews, and not very many. And so the things that I've had to get to are archives, right? Her letters, interviews with people who knew her, and her own autobiographical tapes. So I have her autobiographical tapes that she recorded in anticipation of releasing a memoir, but they never did it. She never did anything with it. The Times we had is a posthumous sort of cut and paste of these memoirs. So these two editors found her tapes and decided after her death, this is during the Patricia Hearst kidnapping,
Hmm.
when there was sort of a renewed interest in Hearst, to craft a memoir themselves that might have been sort of what a Marion Davies memoir might have looked like. But the tapes are something very different. The tapes are a conversation between her and a trusted friend. And so I get a lot from those tapes, both what Marion Davies thought, but then again, that also has to be interpreted a little bit because she wrote it at a difficult time in her life, and it colors some of the things that she says about certain people and certain events. But it also shows me how she interacted with people and what her personality was. And so those tapes have been very useful. And also the tapes that Fred Lawrence Giles did for his biography, the only other biography that has been written about Marion Davies, in 1972. I have his tapes, his interview tapes. So So those things have been very useful. But the personal interviews, they just don't really exist. So
Do you feel also that, I mean, that time in Hollywood, at what time did she start writing or putting this together in the trajectory of her life?
the tapes.
The tapes and the book that she began working on.
Right. That was the early 1950s. So she started recording the tapes in early 1953, and then she stopped the next year. It didn't take very long, but there were about 16 tapes that were recorded,
Mm.
and I'd say about half of them are still in existence, and the rest of them, it's a whole big long story, but the rest of them have been lost. But there is a complete transcript that exists. So I've looked at the transcript for those lost tapes, and then the tapes that I have access to, I listen to and use her words wherever possible.
You know, a lot of celebrity biographies came out, you know, especially in the early 1960s and 70s. And even then, a lot of those celebrity biographies or autobiographies that came out were a product of the era that they had come through. And there's this whole MGM publicity department, and that painted a picture of people that was not based on any type of reality. Let's face it, how honest was she in terms of telling her story on these transcripts and in these tapes?
Well, like I mentioned, she started recording them at a difficult time in her life. This was shortly after Hearst died, and she was having trouble with the Hearst sons, which pained her horribly. And so she was upset about some of the things that were happening to her.
Hmm.
And so there's that colors what she said. And then there's also the fact that she felt, I mean, this is the same reason why she didn't really give interviews, partly, right? Because she feared revealing too much. She feared revealing too much about her relationship with Hearst, about her. This was an era of intense social stigma around the life that they had lived.
Hmm.
So she didn't want to say too much. She was holding back. And that's the reason really why this project was abandoned, because an honest autobiography was proving to be unattainable. But that said, when I listen to the tapes, I can take what she says and I can go to other sources and try to verify what she says. And I've been able to do that for many things that she says. Other things she says, I've been able to go to other sources and say, okay, well, that's not true. And I also get to hear, as I mentioned before, I also get to hear how she interacted with the interviewer and how sweet it was. It was a lovely relationship that they had between friends. You know, he was much younger than she was, and so she would always refer to him as, you know, sweetie, honey. You know, this lovely little rapport that she had with him that doesn't come through in the book, because in the Times we had, right, the posthumous cut and paste, because that one was put together as a single narrative and not as a conversation.
Now, I also want to ask you, and again, I don't want to give away any spoilers because I want people to buy the book. But if you can talk about the two most powerful gossip columnists in Hollywood at that time, Luella and Hedda, and
Yeah.
how they shaped her life and the influence they had on her and her thoughts on them as well.
Right. Hedda and Luella were two of the biggest forces in Hollywood. They were feared. Anything that they printed had the potential to make or break a career. And Luella Parsons, we'll start with Luella.
Mm-hmm.
Luella Parsons had worked at a different paper before she started writing for Hearst in 1923. And Marion helped get her that job. Marion helped get her the job from the Telegraph to helped her make the change from the Telegraph to the Hearst papers. And so Luella had written really glowing things about Marion, hoping to get a job at the Hearst papers. And then she moved west in 1925 with Marion. So Marion and Luella were on the train together when Luella came out to California for the first time. And she started working there and really getting into the heart of Hollywood. But she was a Hearst journalist. She was a Hearst journalist, and Marion sometimes, I mean, I don't want to give away too much here because it's all in the book, but she knew, let's put it this way, she knew what side her bread was buttered on.
Exactly.
Yes, and it was very hard for Marion because Marion considered her a friend, and there were some betrayals, and it was hard. Hedda, on the other hand, even though Hedda Hopper, is this sort of rabid right-wing nutcase in many ways, but she, to her credit, was very good to Marion in comparison to Luella. She remained a close friend until the end. And Hedda had started out as an actress. I don't know how many people know that, but Hedda had started out
right.
Yes, as an actress, and she was with Marion in a movie called Xander the Great, and Marion helped support Hedda as she made this career change too, to being a columnist. And even though she didn't, she wasn't like Luella, so Luella was so tied to the Hearst papers. She really loved Marion, as many people did, but she was much more loyal than Hedda was. I mean, than Luella was. Yeah.
Well, I want to talk a moment about the road that led her to Hollywood. And again, I mean, the details in this book are just amazing. And how she eventually got to MGM and her relationship with Louis B. Mayer.
Sure. She started out as a chorus girl in New York. And she, long story short, we won't give away the big details, but she was taken under Hearst's wing in 1918 and became a contract player, or a star, we'll say a contract. She became under contract, we can say, to Cosmopolitan, which was Hearst's studio. And she worked in New York up until 1924 when she moved out to Hollywood. The center of the film industry was in New York for a long time. And then there were a bunch of studios that started popping up in California, in Southern California. And it was clear eventually that the future of the film industry was in California. So Hearst followed that and moved Cosmopolitan out west to join with the newly formed MGM. So Cosmopolitan joined with MGM. It was very beneficial for MGM to have Cosmopolitan because it meant automatic coverage of MGM movies in the Hearst papers. It's very lucrative. So Marion moved with Cosmopolitan out west, signed a contract with MGM because Cosmopolitan was now part of MGM. And she was able, with her new contract, to have more control over her career. She had been in these big, lavish dramas and things with elaborate sets that Hearst was so eager to spend money on. But she really wanted to be a comedian from the very beginning. And people saw that she was a comedian. They would see her at parties and see her sort of acting up on the set and think, this woman is extremely funny. And so she went to Irving Thalberg, the head of production at MGM, and they together sort of teamed up and convinced Hearst to allow her to play in more more serious comedies, right? More pure comedies, solid comedies. She had done a little bit of light comedy. She had done light comedy before, but she wanted to do more. So she was in this movie called The Fair Co-Ed, which is a basketball movie, and she's just like running and jumping around everywhere and doing slapstick. And that was the first real comedy that she did. Then she followed that up with Beverly Graustark, which is also pretty funny. And then later on, she did this spate of movies in 1928, The Cardboard Lover, The Patsy, Show People, right? So by 1928, she was a comedian by 1928. And Hearst finally came around a little bit and said, okay, we can do this. So he was able to move a bit, but he never really lost this idea of Marion Davies as what he initially imagined her to be, this beautiful ethereal creature who was to be surrounded. He wanted her to play in Marie Antoinette, right?
Mm-hmm.
Later on, when she was approaching 40, and that just was not going to happen for many reasons. But anyway, so she established herself at MGM, and I think she was quite happy there. She made a lot of friends, both in the acting department and also in the writing, and I think she had a good time.
Well, I want to ask you, because one of the takeaways from your book is she really had a strong sense of who she was,
yes.
Where she fit in. And she had a real strong sense, in terms of negotiating. And I'm not talking just about negotiating contracts. I'm talking about negotiating life itself. She was very, very independent and knew what she wanted and went after it. Where do you think that really came from? That gravitas, that grounding that she had, that made her, with the biggest names in show business, she stood her ground.
I think a lot of it was temperamental. I think that it was who she was. She was raised with a certain sense of independence. I think that she had that naturally, and her parents didn't ever try to quash her spirit. Her parents appreciated her for who she was. And I think that gave rise to some confidence in her that allowed her to know her spot in the world. And she, I don't know, she was always a very independent person. She was earning her own money by her teen years, and she knew how the industry worked.
And she became a very good advocate for children. That was something that was an eye opener for me.
Yes.
If you want to shed light on that for a moment.
Yeah, she loved children, and realized when she moved to LA that there was a need in West LA for a health clinic for low-income children in West LA. There really wasn't anything of the sort there. So she founded one. She founded the Marion Davies Children's Clinic, that was a free healthcare clinic for low-income children in West Los Angeles. So any low-income child who needed healthcare could come to the Marion Davies Children's Clinic and get high-quality care. These were doctors from other clinics in the community who would volunteer their time to come to the Marion Davies Children's Clinic and treat these kids. And the interesting thing about, well, a lot of interesting things, but one of the interesting things about the Marion Davies Children's Clinic was that not only was it, a need that was filled for these low-income children, but the community of West LA at that time was largely Mexican and Japanese immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of racism. This is the mid-20s, right? There was a lot of racism in the country at this point. And the clinic served everyone. So it was a haven. It was a safe haven from the racism of the time. And I have some interviews with kids who were treated at the clinic, and they talk about that. They talk about how one person's father had been rejected by the unions because he was Mexican, but there was equal treatment. There was equal treatment at the clinic. And so that was a real lifesaver for many people, psychologically and emotionally. So it provided a real service.
I'm going to get to you in a moment and your process in terms of everything coming together, but writing the book, what do you consider was the biggest aha moment for you?
That's a really good question. There are a lot of aha moments in many different domains. There was the aha moment that this was going to be a big biography, right? This was going to be like a full-length thing. And I was getting all this information so fast. I just thought, yeah, there's no way I'm going to be able to make this anything but a huge biography. Listening to her tapes, listening to her autobiographical tapes, I realized, I think I talk about this a little bit, I talk about this a little bit at the beginning of the book.
Mm-hmm.
I realized who she was, like as a person. I heard it. I saw it. Like we were, as if we were across from each other.
When you started out on this journey, you already knew that you were going to be writing a book. You did not imagine that it was going to become this huge book that it became. But as you were writing this book, was there something that turned you around early on where you said, my God, this story has to be told?
Well, I sort of already knew that the story had to be told because I knew that she had been misunderstood. But I think it was an organic. I think it was an organic process. As the more I kept going, the more I thought, wow, this is really great, and this is a story with an arc. Her life had a natural arc that really lent itself to a compelling story. And I just followed the arc. And so I guess I can't really say when I realized that this arc was there. It just sort of revealed itself. And I just put it together.
Now, I always ask all authors this question, and the answers are varying across the field. When did you know that this book was ready to go to the public?
It's a tough question because nothing is ever done. Nothing is ever there. There's always more. But I really think that having a deadline helps. I had been working for a long time. I had started writing. I had essentially finished the book. The arc that I was talking about had been written, and I had gotten a publisher. It's a whole big long story about that as well. But I had.
I want to ask about that. At what point in your process did you reach out to a publisher, or did they reach out to you?
It's kind of a nice story, actually. From the very beginning, University of California Press was my number one top dream publisher. And the reason for that is because, one, it was an academic press, so I knew that it would be that they would be as interested in the historical accuracy as I was, and I wouldn't be forced to tell a story in a way that would sell, quote unquote, right? I could tell the story as it was, present the facts, right? So academic press. And also Marion had such a connection to the University of California because the children's clinic we were talking about before, the children's clinic was donated eventually to UCLA. And so she had a real link to UCLA and the University of California. So those two things together made University of California Press my number one top publisher. So fast forward 9 years, right? And I was introduced to somebody from the University of California Press, and I talked about the book, and they jumped at it right away. I wrote a
Proposal?
yes, thank you, a proposal, and sent it in, and they approved it. We got a contract together, and I had a deadline to get them the manuscript. And so it was wonderful. It was wonderful that and that's been the story of this book too. I've had so many things go right, which is not exactly normal when you're writing a big book like this. People have a lot of setbacks, but it's been very smooth sailing for me, which is great.
Now,
But
this is going to be a woo-woo question,
go ahead.
but do you feel that she had any hand in this book as well?
Well, I
I
think
know that's a crazy question.
it's sort of interesting because I think that a lot of the things that have happened are so kind of what she would have done with her friends, like helping people out by getting them this job, and yeah, it's not something that I normally buy into, but sometimes I find myself being like, oh, thank you, Marion. Right.
Serendipitous moments.
Yeah.
So when the book was finished and it was gotten to the publisher, and now it's out for
Mhm.
everybody to get your own copy, how has your life changed since the book has come out?
Well, I'm a lot more exhausted because I have a lot of events to do.
Which is good. That's a good thing.
It's very good. It's all very positive, yes. But right now I'm in LA, right? I'm in LA for a weekend of events. I live in Oakland, so I live up in Northern California.
That's great.
But yes, but I did an event on Thursday with Larry Edmonds Bookshop in LA. I have this today, which is wonderful, and then I have on Sunday I have a big event at the Annenberg Beach House, which is one of Marion's homes. So I have this spate of events in LA. I got back from New York a few weeks ago. I'm going to DC. So I feel like I'm traveling all over the place.
That's
And
good.
yes, it's wonderful. And a friend of mine in LA just earlier this morning said, "Oh, do you want to travel out to Burbank and have coffee?" I was like, I can't travel anywhere anymore. It's exhausting. But it's wonderful. It's wonderful, and I wouldn't have it any other way. It's a good kind of exhausted.
So as you were writing the book, and I mean, again, as I said earlier, it's truly a collaborative process. And you said that it was rather easy for you. Once the door started opening, did each door lead to another door opening? Or again, what was your process in terms of
Yeah.
writing the book? Were there specific hours that you put aside each day? Or did you find that this became your magnificent obsession that this book had to be done?
Many doors opened as a result of other doors being opened. That's absolutely true. I would go to an archive and I would find a piece of information, and then I would go search for more information about that new piece of information, and then it would be everything would just kind of fall open, and it would be all there. And in terms of the magnificent obsession thing that it had to be done, it wasn't necessarily that I set aside a certain number of hours to work every day. I did try, when I was in the writing process, I did try to write every evening. So I do my best work at night. That's something that I don't know if that's common. I've heard it before, but my best work is done at night when there are no distractions and I can just get it all out. So I would stay up, especially in the last part of the writing process, when the book was approaching the deadline to send it to the publisher, I would stay up, until like 2 a.m, just getting everything together, writing, reviewing, editing, and so I would do that, every night, more or less every night, depending on how much needed to be done, for maybe like 3 or 4 months until the book was ready.
Were there any bumps in the road, or was it smooth sailing all along?
Trying to think if there are any major bumps in the road. I can't really think of any, which is pretty great. Yeah, I mean, the real bump in the road, though, was COVID. When COVID hit,
Yes.
and I couldn't get into the archives to get certain things that I needed. But the people who worked at those archives were wonderful. They would say, okay, well, we can make a special trip, and we can go in there and just tell us what box we need to go into, and so they did it for me, and I'm really very grateful to those people. I thank them in my acknowledgments specifically, because it was above and beyond what they did.
Now, I reached out and I asked for a favorite photo, which we have in our background, but this photo, I mean, first of all, the book is gorgeous. It's a beautiful book.
Yes.
How much input did you have into the look and feel of the book?
I chose that photo. I wanted that photo to be the cover. I think it says a lot about Marion.
Mm-hmm.
It shows her confidence. It shows her self-assuredness. And it shows that she was the captain of her soul. I mean, you can sort of see it in her face, right? Just this very solid person. And
I mean, how did the title come to you? Because first of all, great title.
Thank you. The title came to me from Marion's own autobiographical tapes. When she was recording her autobiographical tapes, she was talking about Hearst to the person who was interviewing her, and she said, he really wanted me to be everything that he wanted me to be, because he really did adore me. But I'm the captain of my soul. And therefore, what I want to do myself, regardless of what other people think that I should do. So that's number one. And then if you read where it comes from a poem, right? So she was quoting a poem. She's a very literary person. She was quoting a poem called Invictus by William Randolph Hearst. You read the poem, it's in the book. And it so mirrors many of the experiences in Marion Davies' life. So I thought that needed to be the title. One, because it was Marion's own words about herself. And two, because the poem just evokes so much about her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And now that the book is out, what do you hope that readers will come away with from reading this book?
I hope that they will come away with the idea that Marion Davies was her own person. She was a woman at a difficult time for women, who asserted herself and was the captain of her soul. And we can take a lot from that. We can learn a lot from Marion and her story, just to always be yourself, to not apologize or give in for anything that you feel like you need or want to do. And also an interesting thing that I think it's relevant. She helped Ingrid Bergman out a lot when Ingrid Bergman was being vilified in the press for her affair with Roberto Rossellini. Some of the things that she said about Ingrid Bergman, I think, could also apply to Marion herself. She said about Ingrid Bergman, she said, if a woman of her great character has courage enough to really go ahead with her life, why should she be criticized?
Amen.
So she said that about Ingrid Bergman, and we could also talk about that with Marion, right? I mean, I think that she had a lot of courage to live her life her way, and we can learn from that.
Absolutely. We are going to do, thank you for your generosity, because in addition to being here today in the midst of your busy schedule, and I hope you've got your coffee so we can at least have our coffee together. So
Yeah.
you are also going to give away an autographed copy of your book, so which I appreciate. And anything I can do in terms of spreading the word about this book, trust me, I'm going to be out there singing your praises everywhere, because I just love the book. But the
Thank you so
word
much.
that the phrase I chose today, everyone, is financial stability. I pulled this morning, and when it comes to financial stability in Marion Davies' life, finish the sentence.
Oh boy, there's so much to say. Uh, Financial stability was something that came naturally to Marion herself. She was always very good with her own money. She had a lot of it. She negotiated her own contract with MGM for $10,000 a week and invested very wisely. Hearst was terrible with money, and when he had financial problems, it surprises a lot of people that he had financial problems. But in the mid 1930s, the Hearst Corporation was going under, and Marion, within 48 hours, pulled together $1 million and gave him a check to help him. Didn't want to be paid back. Hearst Corporation said, we can't accept a gift. It has to be a loan. But she didn't want to be paid back at all. But it's because of Marion and her own financial stability and her desire to use her financial stability to help other people that the Hearst Corporation still exists today.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Danny Miller, who's watching, and he's been singing your praises all through the show. So thank you, Danny. He said today is Joan Fontaine's birthday.
Yes, it is.
To ask you about her contact with Joan and Sister Olivia. And then I'm going to tell you an anecdote that I have about Joan Fontaine.
Great.
So,
Okay.
You go first.
Yeah, I interviewed Joan Fontaine via email, via writing. It was lovely. She to connect it to Marion a little bit, actually. Joan and Marion Davies knew each other, and Joan, I don't think terribly well, but Joan wrote Marion a really beautiful condolence card when Hearst died. And I saw it in her archives, in Marion's archives. But yeah, so I interviewed Joan. It appeared on my blog on her very last birthday, and it was great. And Olivia, I met Olivia in Paris.
I am you for that one.
Yes, I met her in Paris in 2011, and I have a signed copy of Every Frenchman Has One, her book, and they're both of them were sadly very dignified, great ladies.
In the early 80s, when No Bed of Roses came out, I went to, there was a series in New York by Harold Kennedy, and he went to interview her, and she came in, Joan Fontaine, gorgeous, regal, as you said, dignified, perfect word to describe. And she came in and she said, I will talk about anything except my sister.
Right.
And the very first person that stood up said, who's your sister?
Oh my gosh.
and
that is funny.
It brought the entire room down. And I will never forget this. Joan Fontaine stood up and she got all the flowers, and there were flowers everywhere. And she got them into like this huge bouquet, took them to her, said, these are for you, and I'm taking you out to dinner afterwards.
That is hilarious. That sounds very Joan.
And it was just one of the most incredible, I will never forget that. And it was
hilarious.
Just a memory of being there. And because when this woman stood up and said, who's your sister? You could hear this collective gasp go right through the entire room. That's amazing.
Oh, that's funny. Love
So
it.
as we wind down, I've just got some fun questions that I'm going to ask you. Have nothing to do with the book or anything. They're just random questions. And
Yeah.
the first question that I'm going to ask you is, what have you bought that you love so much that you would happily buy it again? And I'm going to tie it in with your book. What moment or what thing have you bought in relation to Marion Davies that you would buy happily again?
There's a photo. There's a photo that appears in the book that I am in love with. It's a photo of Marion with her little dog, with her dog Gandhi, who is pulling on her coat. I don't know if you saw that in the book, Richard, but it's there, and it was not a cheap photo. I had to get a lot of a lot of resources together to get that photo, but I needed that photo. It says so much. It says so much about her and her relationship to her dog, right? And how he's pulling on this probably very expensive coat, and she's just laughing at him. I love that picture, and I would happily have gotten all those resources together to get it again if I needed it.
How did you find this photograph, and how were you able to actually purchase the photo?
It was it was it was I saw it at an auction, actually. I think it was being sold at one of the Bonhams or Christie's
Mhm.
or something, and I saw it, and I had never seen it before, and I'm not sure where it came from, but I said I have to have this for the book.
Well, good for you.
So
And
yeah,
good for
and it
all
came
of
with
us.
a set of other. There were several other photos that came with it that are also lovely, but it was for that photo that I needed that stack of pictures.
So this card is called an impact card,
Yeah.
and it says, "Reach out to someone from your past and tell them something you appreciate about them." So, again, in relation to writing the book, and I know you mentioned your mom in the book, in your introduction, reading
Yeah.
over everything. So, Mom, thank you for that. But someone on your journey to get this book published that you would like to just give a shout out to right now?
Um, living or not living, or does it
Or
matter?
either or.
Marion's great niece, Marion Lake Canessa, who lives in France and has been an absolute gift to this project in every way you can imagine. All her support, we've become very good friends, um, and all her stories and her memories have been invaluable. Um, Another person is Stanley Flank, who I mentioned. Both of those people are in the special acknowledgments page.
Yes.
Stanley Flank was uh, the person who helped Marion do her autobiographical tapes and was also a correspondent for Life magazine. Was the only member of the press witness to Hearst's death, and he's still alive. Um, and he's also been a tremendous gift to this project.
And this is called the Benjamin Franklin effect. That's the
Okay.
card. Okay. And it says, ask a person for a tiny favor to make them like you. Well, I like you a lot. I hope you like me as well.
I do
For
like you.
example, pass me the tissue, please. Or what's your Wi-Fi password? I love this. The so-called Benjamin Franklin effect is a cognitive bias that causes people to like someone more than they do that person a favor. I don't like the way this is phrased. There's so many people out there who helped get this book to where it is today. So I want to thank all of them.
Me
And
too.
I want to thank you because it's, again, I love biographies. I don't read fiction, uh, full disclosure, but because I believe that real life is much more exciting. And I read biographies. When this arrived in the mail, I felt like it was Christmas morning. And I sat down, and thank you for your inscription to me in the book. Sat down and started reading this book, and I could not put it down. So again, I want to thank everyone. We're going to give away a copy of the book right now. So this is what we do. So we've gotten a few people. I'm going to ask another question that'll give people a chance to respond. And what the question is, what's been good this week in relation to your book?
What's been good this week in relation to my book? This is to me.
This is to you.
Okay. So, well, there are a lot of things happen a lot, so I have to think about it. The event at Larry Edmunds was lovely. The event at Larry Edmunds on Thursday was very, very nice. It was a crowd of many people who I knew. You know, I have a lot of friends in LA, and they were all there and cheering on the book, and so that was wonderful. And trying to think what else. Well, apparently I haven't seen it yet, but apparently there's a big color full page UC Press ad in the LA Times today, where Captain of Her Soul is featured. So that's good. Looking forward to the Beach House event on Sunday. I feel like was there something else big that happened this week? I feel like there was. Of course, I'm trying to rack my brain to think of it. Yeah, I mean there's so many things happen all the time, and it's great.
Well, it's great. Let's give away a copy of your book. Thank you all for being here today. This is how this is done. And again, I'm going to say my closing remarks, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. You've got the final word today. Frances Shea, dear friend.
Oh, yay. Okay.
You know Frances?
I don't, but that's great.
Frances is on Facebook. Connect that way. And, and if you have trouble, let me know. It really is an incredible book. And I want to thank everyone for being here today. I truly believe, Lara, that you have given Marion her voice. And,
thank you. That means a lot.
I think that is the greatest gift that anybody can do for anyone else. And you celebrate her, you tell her story, and it's just an incredible book. I end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. If you can afford to do this, go to your favorite bookseller, and it is available on Amazon, and I will pull the address up here. But if you put in Captain of Her Soul, it's going to come up. But it is available on Amazon. But you can call your favorite bookseller and make sure that they have this book in stock in the store, and you can request it. That's a good thing that you can do. I also say, if you're able to afford to do this, go and order 2 copies of this book. Keep one for yourself and send one to the second name that pops up on your Facebook friends list today. Because I always believe it's very important to reach out and let people know what you think of them. I mean, we all get a chance to get to know Marion because of the pages of this book. But in terms of our real friends that are here with us now, take the moment, pick up the phone, call that second name on your list, and reach out with that phone call and let them know what you think of them. In positive terms, of course. So I would love for everyone to read this book because it is just so incredible. I have a dear friend, Sean Moniger, and he always says we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. You never know what someone else is going through right now. But she was the captain of her soul, and I am the skipper of mine. So, so anyway, I'm going to leave the screen, Lara, and I'm going to turn it over to you. You've got the final word today. It could be about anything that we talked about that you want to build upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had. This is your chance to say that. Or if there's just any message that you want to leave everyone with today, a philosophy or anything that perhaps you learned from Marion in terms of writing this book. And don't worry about how to end the show. As soon as you say goodbye, the final credits will roll. And my hope is that anytime you feel that you have a story to tell or anything, that you'll consider Richard Skipper Celebrates as one of your stopping off points. Because
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed getting to know you today.
Yes, and me too. Thank you, Richard. It's lovely what you do. I mean, it's just really beautiful.
No, thank you. And it's all yours now.
Thank you. So I think what I'd like to say regarding what I learned from Marion is to always build people up. She was generous to a fault, some people say, and she always thought about other people before herself. And she always made it a point to build up her friends and to make sure that everybody else had what they needed. And of course, the lesson too for that is don't forget yourself. Don't forget to take care of yourself. Otherwise, you can't take care of other people. But it's a real lesson that we can learn from Marion to be aware of others.